Assassin's Creed 3, an action-adventure game set during the American Revolution. It's filled with combat, and it's an open-world concept of a game where you can discover regions that you get set into. The game is set into the east coast of the original 13 colonies, and the game world consists of 3 main areas: Boston, New York City, and a large wilderness known as the Frontier. A few cutscenes, although unplayable, have you going places like Philadelphia, but more on that later. Before the topic of the game itself, it's interesting to look at the map landscape, as so much of the developer's time goes to crafting a perfect map due to the player really needing to be immersed in the gameplay they're consuming. For this, Ubisoft says geography-wise they are about as accurate as they can be, but for their games, they take primary sources of things like maps to create their city landscapes. Obviously, the more intricate things such as building interiors are made up. Since the game takes about 55.5 hours, with 16.5 of that being the main story, having a very accurate representation is important to keep the player interested in the older streets of these cities. The New York that we're set in doesn't have the flashing lights of Times Square or the immersing time-lapse videos of the Knicks court in Madison Square Garden changing to the ice for the Rangers to play. I mean, the game looks great. Somewhat. The game was released in October of 2012. It became one of the most, if not most popular consumed media pieces about the American Revolution, with it being a commercial success, selling more than 12 million copies worldwide, with the game getting remastered and better graphics on March 28th of 2019. Even though it was the same game, it still sold approximately 300,000 copies at a fraction of the price of the original game, grossing $8 million. The original graphics were, yeah, but the game's remaster did receive a facelift that made the game more smooth and look 10 times better. I mean, look at those flowers. Anyways, a quick summary on the history/background of Assassin's Creed. The game is set between the Assassins and the Templars Order. The Templars represent the rich and powerful controlling the weak for their own good, while the Assassins, on the other hand, are empowering the weak to help themselves. I'll let you decide who are the good guys here. On the game itself, it's separated into sequences and missions. See these sequences as sort of a chapter. Some are separated by years and others by months or days. In the game's prologue, consisting of the first 3 main sequences, players control a man named Haytham Kenway. This is the leader of the colonial US Templars, and they have an international organization. The first sequences follow the cruel yet sophisticated lives of the Templars. In the first mission, it oversees Haytham climbing and sneaking his way through a packed opera house in London to assassinate and steal an amulet necklace from a man on a box seat that is rumored to have a key to a storehouse that is located in, well, you guessed it, the 13 colonies. Haytham is an ex-assassin whose troops are known to be very stealthy, so that's where he crafted his skill from. Even with all of the commotion from the body being found, Haytham still ends up slipping through the guards while everybody else is stopped.
And how was the opera?
Rather dull, truth be told.
From this mission, we could see that Haytham is a professional. I mean, just look at that jump. If I did that, well. From this mission in England, Haytham gets promoted to the colonies and arrives in Boston very near his 30th birthday. He arrives in Boston in 1754, at the beginning of the 7 Years' War, where America is being held by a bunch of British redcoats. These redcoats outnumber the French, who have the help of the Native Americans. Although this is the case, the city still does bloom with life, but with poverty on the rise, it is open to see a lot of crime happening and overall public distaste. From here, Haytham meets his new team of Templars: William Johnson, Thomas Hickey, Benjamin Church, John Pitcairn, and a future Templar, Charles Lee, who, yes, are all real people. The Council's colonial land expertise sends Haytham to visit a Native American group called the something like that. He knows that as a Brit, it'll take long to gain the natives' trust. For this, he launches missions to liberate captured natives by the British and works together to assassinate a British general, in 1755 killing Edward Braddock. Braddock is a real British general who again did die in 1755, just as the game, staying historically relevant. Braddock died en route to take a French-claimed area alongside George Washington. The game even states they're en route to do as what happened in 1755, with one of the cutscenes having George Washington in it. This scene alone sets the viewer up with the historical accuracy that Ubisoft shows in their games, with having real characters as the main ones of the story. Moving on, this really strengthens Haytham's relationship with Zio, the Native American who has been helping and communicating with to gain the trust of. Because of this, Zio, with her expertise of the Frontier, takes Haytham to the sacred site where he learns that he does not have the proper key. After these missions, Haytham and Zio end up getting feelings for each other and end up getting intimate. After this, the story jumps forward to Sequence 4. in 1760, a settlement called Kanetikishon, where we enter the life of a boy named Rtedagedon. This boy ended up being the son of Hatham and Zio. Although Hatham left and was never in the life due to the family being Native Americans, he was still very accepted by his family and village. Their village was in the middle of the 7 Years' War and never helped the French, but rather remained neutral, which now the war was over at this point. One day, the boy went to play. When he returns to his village after a hide-and-seek game, he finds out it's been pillaged, set on fire, and he finds his dying mother where he can do nothing but watch. Before Charles left, the man who started the fire, he asked for his name, where Charles told him the Templar mission like a true villain. Now Rtedagedon has one goal: kill Charles Lee. Obviously, the boy can't do anything now, so that is where we jump 9 years later to 1769, to the boy who is now 13 years old and showing exceptional skill in hand-to-hand combat and becoming one of the best hunters and survivors in the regions from the village's new built land. From here, the boy is given a sign from his elder that he must find. This is the Assassin's Crest. From here, he finds a sign, and the man, who will be his mentor, named Achilles Davenport. At first, he doesn't want to mentor him, and is a bit, well...
Get the hell off my land!
But after protecting the homestead from bandits with his advanced combat skill, he proceeds to help him with his journey of becoming an assassin. As Achilles is old now and he needs somebody to carry the assassin order through the next 4 years, the boy who is being mentored in combat and parkour learns of the Templar Order. He finds that the man who he seeks to kill, Charles Lee, is at the top of their hierarchy and will be hard to reach, especially considering their strong ties with the British. The boy who can pass as white as he is mixed is given a name by Achilles to pass as white to be able to reach more places in the city without being discriminated against. This name is Connor. Achilles knows to give him this alter name, as him being black has known the hardship that people of color face and that Connor has not experienced yet in the cities. This is the unfortunate truth, as where the game again lines up with real life, that the people face brutal discrimination, less rights, and sometimes even slavery. In 1770, Connor goes to the city of Boston for the first time to spy on the Templars. Connor has known the growing tension between the colonists and the British, but the Templars are pulling strings to weaken the colonists and the British so they can increase the hold on their colonies. This is seen when Charles Lee is overlooking the site of the Boston Massacre. He fires the first shot, prompting the troops to assume it was the citizens and open fire on the unarmed people, again showing how the Templars are bad people of the story, but again having real connections. The Boston Massacre in 1770 did not go the way that the game interprets it, of Charles Lee initiating it, but it shows the relevance of the shooting overall. After this, Connor is back at the homestead and gets a note that a Templar, William Johnson, is buying the land that Connor's family is situated on. He needs to kill him to prevent the sale. He finds that he gets the money from ports where he smuggles tea. From here, Connor meets a man named Samuel Adams, who is setting up a protest known as the Boston Tea Party, just as what happened in 1773. This was a perfect opportunity for Connor, as it helps the colonists who are enemies of his enemies, but it also helps get rid of William Johnson's tea supply, which will help flush him into the open where Connor can assassinate him as one of the top Templars. In this mission, Connor had to kill a bunch of redcoats while dumping the tea. Considering all game events are different, spawning in more troops the longer you take, well, let's just search it up and see how many died during the Boston Tea Party. Looks like it was a bit dramatized for viewer and player enjoyment, but it gets the relative point across of what happened. The motives of real life to the game were practically the same, and because everything was perfect other than the killing of the redcoats, the Tea Party was a success, just as real life. But because of the Tea Party, it gives Connor a straight line to Johnson, where he kills him. On Johnson's body, he finds the information of his next target, John Pitcairn. John, just as real life, was a high-ranking military officer who created relations between the British and the Templars, where they are now working together. Connor meets with the generals and the leaders of the colonist group, introduced by Samuel Adams for his contribution to the Boston Tea Party, for being a very good fighter. These people being Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and most importantly George Washington, who he goes on a lot of colonist mission with to help their cause of independence that Benjamin Franklin introduced to him. Connor quickly gained the trust of Washington, providing help in battles such as Lexington and Concord, where even before the battle he was riding with Paul Revere, warning the colonists of the British arrival to prepare themselves just as it happened in real life.
The British are coming!
Connor threw himself in battle, saving many colonists held hostage and killing many British troops along the way. The battle ended up being pretty similar to real life, having a lot of deaths and resulting in a colonial victory. Although he was helping his colonist cause, he wasn't furthering his own. This was an issue for Connor, but he knew that getting help from Washington and building their trust, his opportunity would come, and this happened to be true. Washington informed Connor of Bunker Hill, a very famous battle during the Revolutionary War, known to be one of the deadliest in the entire war. At the Battle of Bunker Hill, it was very bloody, with the mission having one of the highest death count of any mission in the game, shooting cannons, killing troops in droves. Washington informed Connor that Pitcairn would be there for Connor to assassinate him. This would be beneficial both to Washington and Connor. Pitcairn was assassinated at the end of the Battle of Bunker Hill, just as real life. Before his death, he famously in-game led a real-life charge to overtake the hill from the colonists. In the game, the British sustained twice as many casualties as the Americans and lost many officers, including Pitcairn, who was actually killed at the end of Bunker Hill, which again is very similar to real life. Now obviously for the story, his death is a little different, where in-game he ended up taking the hill and setting up tents, then got assassinated a couple hours after the battle by Connor, using his stealthy traits and getting behind enemy lines, where in real life, he was really just shot 4 times on his way up the hill. Considering they used Pitcairn for so much plot in the story, at least they give him some justice in getting up the hill, which is something he couldn't do in real life. Moving forward, Connor's relationship with the big dogs has him getting invited to a signing of a document. It's a little bit lesser known, you may not know it. It's called the Declaration of Independence. Now, the scene doesn't really have much value to the story of Connor, but it provides a deeper feeling of immersion into the game, being signed in Philadelphia. After this, Connor heads to New York. Each death he causes to a Templar leader gets him closer to Charles Lee. The next 2 high-ranking deaths were pretty irrelevant in terms of the game, as they were just plot fillers to make the game longer, but also in terms of reality, it didn't have any relation to any real events. During this time, Connor did get arrested. Pretty ironic considering this dude is literally homies with George Washington. He did end up breaking out of the prison he was stationed in with the help of Achilles, but he saw Haytham helping a Templar leader out of the prison. The Templars had known of Connor's presence there and wanted to kill him, but ultimately Haytham, who called the shots, opted out. The reason for this comes later in Sequence 9, where Haytham seeks to meet with Connor, where he would get his opportunity sooner than he thinks. Connor is sent to find a man by Washington who he had been stashing and selling weapons to the Brits. Upon entry, he finds his father, Haytham. The man Benjamin Church turned on the Templars, selling them for a profit. So a common enemy is found between Haytham and Connor. Overwashed with emotions to see how similarly his son has grown at his side, he embarks on a journey with Connor to kill Church. He does, but it follows a cost. Through helping Haytham having sort of a father and son relationship, Haytham uncovers a plot point switch. A note written during the 7 Years' War when he was just a small boy. This had Washington leading a command on his village, the one that killed his mother. All along it wasn't the Templars. Connor was furious with Washington, and rightfully so. A decisive Patriot victory at Monmouth uncovers Lee's plans.
Charles Lee has betrayed you. He forced retreat in the midst of battle, hoping the loss would take the lives of your men and see you relieved of your command.
What?
That man is your enemy, and he will not stop until you are dead or dishonored. Should you choose to spare Lee's life, then I will take it myself. Enjoy your victory, Commander. It will be the last I deliver you.
Connor was angry with Washington, as all along it was Washington's conquest, but led by Lee, who committed the cruel acts. He didn't have the time to be angry, as Lee sped false information about Connor to his village. This almost became a native strike on a nearby British outpost that Lee convinced them to do. This would have caused terror to his people and the sure death of his village by what would seem their own hand, but really got started by Lee's lies. He stopped as many as he could for the sake of his own people. In the midst, he killed his own childhood best friend out of lies spread by Lee. After seeing another one of his family die by Lee's hand, Connor goes on his own. Not this time to save the Patriot cause, but for himself and for his dignity. Connor recruits some of his old pals for help. Lee is stationed at Chesapeake, which is convenient for the Patriots, as just in real life they needed it to halt the transport of items to the ongoing siege of Yorktown. They stormed in by ship, which is similar to Chesapeake as it is very navally covered. Connor finds his way in and planned rain on the town to create chaos to make a perfect opportunity to kill Lee in the confusion, but this is halted. His father, Haytham, stops him. Haytham is old now, of course, but Connor was injured in artillery rained down by his own men. They had a fight where Haytham stated that he needed Lee as he was the only one that could continue all of the work of the Templar Order in the colonies. Haytham seemed a bit slower and he stated he was just there to stop him with no real threats of death. As an ex-assassin, they carry a hidden blade to the left arm. After beginning to choke him to reason, he left his left arm free, not because he was stupid, but because he would allow his son to choose his own path and continue without him. With Achilles' mentorship and telling Connor before his expedition to Chesapeake that he must kill Haytham, he follows suit and finishes the job. Haytham has now done what he saw most to do. He provided Lee an escape by slowing down Connor, but it was either up to Connor or Lee to prevail. After this, Lee had his time and his colonies come to an end. The threat of Connor's next move was too great and too much for him. Knowing that he was no match left, he left to the harbor to book passage out to London. Connor knew this, so he met him at the harbor and gave chase to him. Connor, hazed by the chase and being bloodied and almost drifting in and out of consciousness, he wasn't going to let this stop him, as what he sought and trained for his whole life was so close. Although Lee was not responsible for Connor's village burning, and Washington was, he knew that with him still alive, the cost would be too great. Raining terror on his people, Lee needed to die. He tracked him down to a tavern, and at this point, it wasn't for Connor or for Washington, but for his people. With this, Connor's fight was over. This also marked the end of the revolution, having unity among the people. Achilles died that day, but he died knowing the assassin order would be in good hands, with the boy who he taught from 5 years before the revolution to now ending it. Here Connor found that the name he was given was Achilles' late son. And this is where our story comes to a close. Overall, the revolution itself tends to overshadow the impacts of the 7 Years' War and the natives' peoples, but this whole game is practically based around those two, which helps people understand the significance of these events to your average couch potato playing this game just to kill people for fun. Overall, each battle or mission was to set up to have significance for Connor to participate in. It was very clever in the way that they did it, from the Boston Tea Party to the battles at Lexington, Concord, Monmouth, Bunker Hill, and Chesapeake, to even riding with Paul Revere. It's very cool as some real-life written letters can be found in-game as you explore either Boston, New York, or the frontier. The intuitive story of development of Ubisoft is great. Taking random generals and lining up their real-life deaths with the timeline of the game is ingenious. It provides sort of an extra level of depth into the game and the reality/realisticness of it. Other intricate details such as when time goes on, the British troops in the cities decrease and the colonists increase. Although some things in the game what may seem insignificant to the story, in reality is what actually happened. This is what I see some of the developers of the game trying to grasp. The reality of it is all attached to the story of the game. I grew up playing the Assassin's Creed game, so I definitely do have some bias in my soon-to-come score, but the historical outreach that this game had was great, and it was known to be great, as prior to the third installment of the franchise, it followed the life of Ezio for 2 full games in Renaissance Italy. The main character of that game, Ezio, was helping notable figures of that time such as Da Vinci, just as Connor helped Washington. The community knew that this game was going to be great. The game did not disappoint at all. Even after 12 years after the game's release, playing all 17 hours of the game that it took me to complete with straight gameplay, it was very enjoyable, and overall is one of my favorite games ever. As a history and video game nerd, having both of those clash into one is just beautiful. It's not my favorite Assassin's Creed game that I've played, but boy, this is genuinely a work of art. I rated it a 9.2 out of 10. I don't know if I'm blinded by nostalgia or the game is just that good. I'm fairly certain it's the second option.
Drop a 50 bag, 29 for the thought. I was really trying to keep it.